Hi, welcome to Color Speak. Today I have a special guest to encourage you. It's Kristen Strong, whose authored books include Girl Meets Change and When Change Finds You. And she's also compiled a 90-day devotional, Praying Through Loneliness. She writes as a friend walking alongside you in your lonely season to a more hopeful, helpful destination. And if you feel like you're not really in a lonely season, that's awesome. But I know that she's going to share with us today some fun encouragement. And what I really liked, Kristen, and I'll let you take it from here in a moment, is you wrote, what is that book? Oh, Desperate Woman Seeks Friends. And the cover is just great because it's a woman with binoculars. So
Yes.
anyway, I welcome you to the show. It's so nice to have you here. Tell me some more about you.
Well, Janet, thank you for having me. What a delight to be here with you too. And yes, so I'm Kristen Strong. I live in Colorado Springs, Colorado. The military brought us here. If you sense a little bit of a twang, it's because I'm born and raised in Oklahoma. And
I love
so
it.
so I have that I haven't lived in Oklahoma for a long time, but I guess Oklahoma still lives in me a little bit. But anyway, yeah, my I met my husband in college and he was going through the ROTC program. So once, we fell in love, once we got married, that I became a military spouse. So we moved around and settled in Colorado Springs, where he works still for the DoD, but on the civilian side of the house. And yeah, we have three children. We have twin sons that are 25 and a delight. One of them is pretty close by, just a couple hours away. The other one is very far away. He's stationed overseas. And then my daughter, who's 21, our daughter, my husband and I's daughter, she is living in Spain, studying abroad this semester. So it's been a wild ride, loving kids across continents. But um,
Ah,
but anyway, she will be home though in late May, so I'm excited about that. And she goes to Texas A&M, so she'll be a senior. She's a junior this year. She'll be a senior next year. But yeah, it's interesting living in one place for a long time after not living in one place for a long time. So that's where we are now.
well, what is that like for you having kids all over the place? Is that something that is maybe easier for you as a military wife? Or is it just like any other mom, you're just feeling it's so difficult, the distance?
It's both, honestly. My husband and I always felt strongly like if our children, if the Lord calls them elsewhere, they have our blessing in that. We will never try to clip their wings. But at the same time, I miss them profoundly, and it's the tension of both. But when we get together, in fact, we get to see our son that we don't get to see very often. This week, he'll be here on leave, so that'll be awesome. And I plan to just cook up a storm and feed him loving through the stomach. So, so
Awesome.
yeah, it's both really, really hard, but when they're happy, that
Right.
helps.
Right.
So,
That's exactly it. So I have four grandchildren that
oh,
moved to Dallas.
mm.
And this was a couple of years ago with their mom and dad, obviously. And I just knew that that was a good thing for them and that God was leading the way. And yet I was heartbroken because we're pretty close and all of the kids live pretty close to me, my son and daughter-in-law and their children, even in our small town. So it was a lot, but I knew that the Lord was leading the charge and that they were going to prosper there, and they have. And so that's been heartening. And I try to get down there as much as I can. In fact, I shared with you earlier, I'm going to fly down this weekend and see them. So because
Well, and we just went to Spain a month ago to see our daughter, and there is something special when you put in the time and effort to see them in their own worlds, That's nice too.
it is. And I have twin grandsons, by the way. And I'm wondering what
Ah,
it looks like on the other end. Like they don't separate out a whole lot now. But they're definitely different personalities. So
yes.
I can see them going their separate ways at some point.
Oh, yes. Well, mine, They shared a room together all through college. Like we said, from the room from the womb through the college dorm, they shared a room. But yeah, they have always had very different personalities. They're just brothers born at the same time, really.
Exactly. Yeah, well,
So
and I want to get onto your subject, but the stories I could share with you about my twins are just wild. I mean, when my daughter was home when they were living here in Olathe, Kansas, in the Kansas City area, she receives a text message from her neighbor and her toddlers. I think they were about 2 at the time, because there's always one that's the ringleader, has pushed
yes.
the screen out and they've offloaded all of the toys from their room into the bushes, the hedge underneath the window, and they're just camped out. They've decided they're gone. And so you can imagine they're always getting into trouble. They're very mischievous. So
Oh, yeah. Well, what one doesn't think of, the other one will. So
100%. I mean, Mimi shows up. I always look at him and go, "Yo, you have to be out of your mind. Who thought this was a good idea? Oh, well, it was Hudson. He decided. No, it was Logan. Whatever.
Well, God bless your daughter, because those are the in
Hard.
the trenches, exhausting years for sure.
It is so hard. So, Kristen, I'm excited to talk to you about friendship today. Off on another tangent, I'm thinking, yeah, we could talk grandchildren all day. But I noticed I was looking through your information that, and first of all, let me back up a little bit and just say that it's been an interesting last couple of months where I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say, I want to know how to make friends. I want
Mm.
to know how to build community that thinks the way that I do and that can celebrate this new glorious time we're moving into, like I know is coming. And so then I get a note from your agency asking me to have you on, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's like a God drop for me to be able to talk friendship with someone who has a following. And then I got online and decided I would follow you, and I thought, well, gosh, I have a lot of mutual friends that are following you, including
Oh,
military wives. So
I love it.
my question is, how did you decide you wanted to write a book about friendship? Because a lot of people have testimonies, they have things they want to share, there are areas of expertise that they feel really burdened to share with others. But friendship, that's one that I don't think we see a lot of. So tell me, how
Mm.
did that happen for you?
Yeah. I think it's a slow, steady process that where the Lord was just kind of directing me more and more towards it. Friendship, for whatever reason, has just been something I have always, in my 50 years of life, thought a lot about. And I think it comes largely from, so I grew up in Osage County, Oklahoma. I grew up on O'Neill Lane, and my last name was O'Neill, as was everybody on O'Neill Lane's last name was O'Neill. So I had a lot of family, lived in the same house pretty much growing up, and so went to the same kind of, the same school system. So really always had friends. And even when I went to college, it was, only 50 miles away. A lot of my family and friends went to that college. And, there was an adjustment period, but I've never really been alone for company. And then though at college, I met David Strong, who was going through like I mentioned, and we fell in love, got married, and then I moved to Ohio, and we get there, and about 10 minutes later, he leaves for training. And so it was like, whoa, I just went from knowing what feels like everybody to knowing nobody. And I realized I had no idea how to make friends. And because of that, I would put forth zero effort into it. I don't know. I thought they were going to apparate on my front porch or something like Harry Potter, or I wore a sign that said new girl. And they were just gonna like start being friendly to me. I did not know how to reach out to others. And I didn't know what I know now, which is that making friends is an art and a skill, and nobody is born with it. I have had so many people tell me, I'm just not, I don't feel like I'm very good at making friends. Well, welcome to the club. It ain't none of us really very good at it. It just takes, practice and intentionality and plain old hard work. And I don't think we think about that as much. We know our relation, if we're married, that takes work. If we're familial relationships take work. But often I think we back burner friendship and just think we'll get to it whenever. Until then, a crisis comes and we realize, yeah, we really need more of a support system important than what we have. So I would say what made me write about friendship was just this incredible learning process the Lord took me on from being a somebody who didn't know how to make friends and honestly kind of was bad at like I was never the mean girl, but I was the needy girl. And that's not fun either. Both act out of real bad insecurities. And so seeing that, recognizing that, and learning things along the way, that's really what led to ultimately to the book.
So it sounds to me like you experienced friendships very organically growing up in Oklahoma,
Yes,
as many
correct.
did, because I think it had me reflective too. I think I was a figure skater, so I was on an ice skating
Oh.
team, and I had all the girls that we competed together, and there we were always together, even when we weren't skating in Southern California. We were taking trips to the beach or acting obnoxious or whatever. And then, of course, there were friends that you met at school or in the workplace, but I do think it changes when you become a parent. Then there are friends that you meet because of parenting, but it isn't
Hmm.
necessarily it isn't those people that necessarily you have as much in common with other than just children. And so
Hmm.
what I'm hearing you say is then you get to a point later on in life and you probably just need to be more selective because then you're looking for heart friends that understand who you are, um,
Yeah.
and those friends that you need to explore a more deeper relationship with as opposed to just people you're hanging out with.
I would say that's probably true. I hadn't thought about it quite like that, but that is true because when you're younger and in school, you're naturally crossing paths with the same people all the time. When you have kids, it's often the same. You meet in the school parking lot or the homeschool co-op or the bleachers at sporting events. So your friends, and your friends by proximity, and unless you're kind of taking that friendship out and about and maybe having dinner together here and there. It's probably just kind of being fed by that you're naturally running into each other. The older we get, the more scattered we are. And certainly as I'm an empty nester now, it takes quite a bit more intentionality, more effort at my stage of life, which is, I think, why so many of us women believe it feels harder to make friends the older we get, is because we are just not in that proximity with folks. Other than, if you're going to church, you are running into people there, but and other, maybe an exercise class here and there, but it's not quite the daily deluge that you had with in years past. Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's you have to be very intentional.
Mhm.
But I also think, like we've already talked about, it's just a different sort of friend you're looking for.
Yes.
Somebody that you can be real with, someone that you identify with in terms of ideology and politics and faith and all of those things. And a lot of folks will say, well, that doesn't really matter, but it does. It really does in today's day and age. And you want to feel free to talk with people like that. And it's not to say that you don't get along with people outside of those parameters, but to find someone that you can go deeper with and like a heart friend, a soul friend that you genuinely want to spend time with and you long for. So, how does that happen? Is that something that you
Mhm.
address in your book or
Yeah,
book?
I would.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. And you bring up that good point. I think that comes along with it's harder to make friends as we get older, but that intentionality is directed, I think, more intentionally at a friend that is a particular type of person because that's just who you're going to naturally connect with without that crutch of proximity necessarily to rely on that you had perhaps more in your younger years in school or with children and what have you. But yeah, I think you're right. And while I'm happy I have friends that kind of have different ideological beliefs and whatnot. I do have friends that certainly we see the world this by and large the same way, and that is a blessing. And I think finding those people, it's just to a certain degree trial and error, but it's also once you do find it and find the connection, not being afraid to perhaps ask, listen, are you available the third Thursday of each month for coffee? Can we just ahead of time kind of make that a standing, a standing date, if you will, then we can get together that way. And then really it's scheduled and kind of does the work for us, and you don't have to do the whole back and forth texting. So I think it's harder in the beginning to find that friend that you really feel like you're on the same wavelength. But then once you do, I think it can, be a little easier to maintain that friendship because you both just leave your time together feeling, like your pants fit a little better because it's been so refreshing. And so there, that's where the work pays off.
I think we do that better, Kristen, as we get older. I think there's less
Mhm.
reticence for us to move forward. I mean, like those organic relationships we've talked about where you just everybody's hanging out together and there's a natural kind of bonding between humans. But outside of that, I think there's maybe a reluctance to approach someone and say, you know what, I really like your dress, or you look great today, or, those kinds of things that are conversation starters that are not even intentionally designed to pave the way to friendship, but just are things that we say naturally. And before you know it, you're talking with someone at a coffee shop. I've had this happen so many times, and people will sit down and we just start talking and then we become friends. And it's just so great. But I think the one thing that I've been more intentional about as I've gotten older is I'm just not afraid to put myself out there because it doesn't really matter what people think. So I can say as a kid, if one this happened to me in a coffee shop. So a beautiful woman comes in, I'm thinking, wow, she's just really pretty. And she sits down next to me and she just has this effervescence about her, right? I mean,
Mm,
we'd call it light. Light attracts light. And I just looked at her and I said, you just look so beautiful today. And before you know it, we're talking and we develop a friendship and it's delightful. Now, I wouldn't have done that as a teenager or a young adult.
right.
I just wouldn't have. I think I would have been worried, oh, she's gonna think I'm a weirdo. Or, or maybe she doesn't want to hear it, or she already knows it, or whatever. A million reasons why the enemy's in our ear going, yeah, don't strike up a conversation. So I feel like now we have a better chance of doing that. And the other part of it is just the transparency issue, right? Like I have zero problem admitting I'm a dork about this, or I do this wrong, or let me act like a doofus, I guess, and if
Hmm.
somebody likes it, great. If somebody doesn't, it's okay. So I think as we just come into ourselves, as the older we get, I mean, you're 50, I'm
Absolutely.
60. So I think like I am way more empowered at my age than I was when I was younger.
Absolutely. That's a benefit of getting older. I think we may have, to do a lot more for our skincare and our general overall health and well-being, but we do care less about how we're perceived. We just don't give the bandwidth to that, which is a real blessing. And I have a whole chapter in the Bible. It's or in the Bible. I don't have a whole chapter in the Bible. I have a whole chapter in my
I was
book.
aggressive though. I was going with it.
God. Listen, I'm in perimenopause. I say that like stuff comes out of my mouth and I'm like, no, that's not it. But
Okay, then
it,
what's my excuse? Because I said, I'm just going to tell you this so fast. So I was somewhere and I went to comment to someone, because I tend to be very,
mhm.
friendly, I guess. And later on, there was not like the banter I expected to happen. And I just kind of moved on and I was exhausted. And I looked at my daughter and I go, sometimes things come out of my mouth and I don't even know why. I mean, I'm not invested in having a prolonged conversation anyway because I'm tired and grumpy.
Mhm.
And yet,
Mhm.
why do the thoughts that I have in my head sometimes just come out through my mouth?
I know. It's like the filter has left the building and it's not even
Uh-huh. Yeah.
yeah, it's anyway. I know it. I hear you. But what I meant to say was I have a chapter in my book that Desperate Woman Seeks Friends that is called Tell People What You Think of Them. And it's that whole exact idea of the rewards that come with when you give somebody a honest not just I'm just trying to butter you up, but an honest compliment or an honest kindness that you just notice. Like you see a kid having a fit and the mom handles it well,
Mhm.
good job, mama, or yeah, complimenting somebody's boots. I had a girl in the coffee shop I was in on, I think last Friday, and she was a teenager, but she came up to me and said, I really like your hair. And I would, And I was like, well, first of all, a teen said that. That's like, well, what better age
Yeah.
group to hear that from it?
Yeah.
Because, I can feel so old a lot of the time. But there is something about that though. Whether you're in your 20s or your 80s, like honestly, what you and I've discovered, I think, is that nobody minds that. Nobody is offended by that when you say something nice to them. You feel a little awkward and weird giving it, but the receiver will be it just can change the course of their whole day. So yeah, there's extreme value in just telling people what you think of them kindly.
Yeah, and I think, and this may be putting the cart before the horse as that relationship progresses. I think that I have found, and I think you would agree with me, Kristen, that as the years have gone by, we're more inclined to tell someone how we feel about them emotionally,
Mhm.
like, I love you. So I don't remember, and I think the generations are better at this because I look at my children now as young adults talking to their friends on the phone, saying, love you, talk to you soon, bye.
Yes,
Things where we never did that with our friends growing up. It was always that kind of those sentiments were reserved for close family members.
right,
I don't know where it was for you, but I know at some point along the line for me, I just started telling people I love them because when I had those legitimate feelings for them,
right.
because I just think it's a wasted opportunity. None of us is guaranteed tomorrow, and we need to make the best of every single day we have on this planet. And if I'm feeling that way about someone, I want to share that with her. I want her to know, you know what, I value you and I love you. And, you're the best or whatever it is those sentiments that I think age really encourages. But like I said, I've noticed generationally things are improving because my kids do that.
Yeah, I think so. Mine do that. Mine do the same thing as well. And I hadn't thought about that either as I haven't thought about that, but I think it's true. I think the millennials and then the Gen Zers, because you and I are Gen X, but they do a better job of they're not there's no problem, I guess, or less feeling less inhibited about just sharing affection with one
Right.
another and not, and there's something to be said when you spend that and you don't hoard it, like that feeds your friendships. Like it's a superpower, I think, really.
So what I'm hearing from you is, this is just once the process is getting started, it's helping move the ball along. What would you say to someone that's tuning in today that says, I really want to make friends and I want to find those types of relationships you all are talking about, but where
Hmm.
am I going to find them? Because I am working this job or I'm sequestered in this area or I don't go to church. What would you say?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know. I would say, first of all, you're not alone. It is harder today to make friends than it ever has been. There's a lot more distractions. We spend twice as much time with our kids as generations pass. So there's less time, if time's a pie, the slice for our friendships is less than there used to be. But I would say, if you can just find one thing to do with a friend, like once a month, reach out to one person and and by reach out, like introduce yourself, tell them your name, ask, how they're doing, and then just ask. Like, that's the thing. It's kind of like a grown-up version of the kid on the playground who says, "Will you be my friend?" You know, you can say, "Hey, are you interested in getting a cup of coffee next week?" Or, "How's your schedule look this month or next?" Just extending one invite to one person who is able to it is just crossing your path. And I guess the way I like to lay that out, that whole process, is I think of three different steps. I think of praying up, showing up, and opening up. First of all, certainly praying to the Lord for friends. Because it is, I mean, God said it is not good for man to be alone. In fact, when Genesis unfolds, God's creation was good, 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 good. And then as Pastor Timothy Keller talks about, it's not until, God sees Adam as alone that he's like, it is not good for man to be alone. And that's the first thing that wasn't good. And so it is not good for us to be alone either. None of us are the exception to that. So when we pray to God to help open our eyes to somebody who would be a good friend. And then also make that person we think would be a good friend interested in a friendship with us. When we pray to that end, we are praying for God's will. And when we are praying for God's will, we're not going to lose. And, also Jesus walked this earth with friends. And if he walked, he was a perfect human, uh, but he still had his friends. So if he had friends, we need our friends as well. And again, God is going to honor those prayers. So praying is the absolute most you can do to help you with your friendship, help you with your friendship, lean friendship seasons. But I also like to think of opening up, I'll do showing up first. Showing up where their people are. So if you're in a faith community, that would be great. If you're not, though, what other activities do you enjoy? What activities are you getting out and about and doing? If that's an exercise class, a painting class, a cooking class, maybe you volunteer in your kid's classroom. I met a good friend of mine because we just were both volunteering in the classroom at the same time, and we just hit it off and took that friendship out of the classroom and got together outside of it. But where can you show up and then cross paths with with people, because staying holed up in the house, that won't get the job done. You have to get outside. It can be neighbors too. Maybe you got a great neighbor that you haven't gotten to know real well, and there's an option there. But then opening up your house.
Mhm.
So there, I'm blessed, right? I'm blessed now with a great group of friends, and not every friendship of mine not every person I've invited to my house has ended up to being a great friend of mine, but every good friend of mine has been at my house. And so there's something to that when you open up your house, you open up a bit of your heart to people, and there's a vulnerability there that people respond to. And they don't care how clean your house is. Ain't nobody going to be comfortable in a museum. Like, just make sure they have a clean place to sit, whether you've invited them over to sit on the porch. For a cup of coffee, or for dinner, people are just so honored that you would invite them over. They don't really care about fancy or perfection at all. And so that's my idea, like a great way to start. Like, Lord, show me where there's people I could be friends with. Point out, ask the Holy Spirit for his discernment. How do I, who's a good person to go to introduce myself in the first place? But then, yeah, but showing up at places and then opening up your house to others. That's, I think, are all three key into finding the friends you want and need.
I really like the praying part. I don't think there's anything but abundance that happens from that.
Nothing but
Um,
abundance. And because it sets your heart in the right place too. Because that's the thing. God wants you to have your friends.
exactly.
It just doesn't always happen on our timeline. Sometimes it takes a really long time to find that person you really connect with and you really feel like you reciprocate with each other really well. And so, but when you're praying in that process, that keeps your heart in a healthy spot when it does take longer than you would like it to as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm writing stuff down because I don't want to forget.
Oh, no
One of the
problem.
things, one of the things that I really was impressed upon, and I was only not even coming into the faith yet, when I was living in San Diego, and the house next to us on a cul-de-sac went up for sale.
Mhm.
And I just remember looking up at the sky and saying, God, not really even sure who he was at that point, but give me a really good friend. Move my best friend in there next door. It's
Mm,
wild because then a woman and her husband, actually, they were military. He was
mm,
a physician, and they moved in, Debbie and Mark, and they were just so good to me. And there
mm,
were times that she would really help me with watching the kids, or he would run over with his stethoscope, and we had cul-de-sac parties, and it was wild that the Lord answered my prayer like that. And then I would also say, I was thinking there's seasons, right, where I was relocated here. They were relocated to Spain, and I was relocated here to Kansas City for my work. And we lost touch over the years. And that has always anguished me, but I understand in trying to pursue that and losing touch, and she's not online or any of that. that was a season that I treasured.
Right.
And so rather than lament the loss of that, I always think that was just such a great little time, season, and I'm so thankful for that. Uh,
Oh, I love it.
yeah, and the other thing I was going to say, and I hope this is encouraging to someone, that just be patient, because I think of myself on the other end where people really reached out to me when I was homeschooling five and raising eight. We live in the country. It was a wild time. I mean, I was all in. I kiddingly used to say, I don't have time to brush my teeth.
Mm.
And I've only recently begun to be acquainted with skincare products. Because I mean, like, I had no time for myself, I'm telling you. So there was this one gal that at church that was so sweet and always pursued me. And then another one through homeschooling. And
Mhm.
they would say, well, I'll drive out to the country and I'll hang out with you and we'll do this or that. And one of them only had two children. And it was just so different because I will say we never got invited anywhere because nobody
Mhm.
invites a family of 10 over. It's a lot.
Oh,
And I understood that. So we just kind of kept the fort down here. But I just kept telling this one woman that her name's Carrie, and we're now seeing each other again. But she was so kind to me because she said, I'm gonna wait for you. Huh.
oh,
And I just remember thinking, wow, like someone who isn't deterred by the fact that I am so busy and I can't have friendships and I can't cultivate friendships. But here's my point. If you're Carrie, if you're that person that's Carrie and you feel like you've pursued somebody that's maybe busy or has a lot going on and it seems like she doesn't have time for you or isn't interested, maybe it's just that she doesn't have time for you. Maybe
a
she's
hundred
very
percent.
interested. So don't give up on that. Just hang in there because the years pass more quickly than we realize when we're in the trenches.
100%. I talk in the book a story about my friend Allie, who and I only have three children, but there was a season where they were upper middle school, but no driver's license, of course. And I just was living in the minivan, it felt like. And I did not we would if we got together, Allie and I, or our families got together, pretty much 100% of the time it was because Allie, who was a season of parenting ahead of me, was reaching out, scheduling it, making the reservation at a restaurant, or inviting us over. I did not extend an invite that whole long. I mean, it was probably 3-ish years or so, maybe even a little bit longer than that during that whole time because I did not. I worked during the day when the kids were at schools, and when they were at home, I just was running, running, running. So I have thought of that so many times about how she could have been aggravated at me or annoyed because I wasn't reciprocating. But that was a season, if that had just been the turn of the friendship and I never did anything ever again and she disappeared, well, I could see, a little more why. But it was for a season and she hung in there with me. And yeah, and you're right. In hindsight, it was like a blip on the radar because and she lives in California, but we have regular phone dates where we actually chat on the phone and communicate that way and see each other every whip stitch. But yeah, I would absolutely encourage the mama who's like, oh, how am I supposed to add that on too?
Yeah.
I totally get that. There are seasons where you just can't, like your socializing is with the people under your roof. But ideally though, that is a season and not forever and ever. Amen.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. And I think we don't need to be disheartened by it because frankly, at the time, there's no room for it and we're too exhausted anyway. And like you, I remember I had the youngest was a competitive swimmer and I would sleep in my car because we're so far away. We're out in the country, so we're so far away from all of the pools in the
Yes.
city. And her dad traveled a lot. So I just really felt like, yeah, I'm not even interested in talking on the phone, really.
Right. It's all like the effort that I do not have.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
all in. So I feel like a lot of the people that are really feeling um, a loss of friendship and a desire to form new friendships are probably those
Mhm.
that are empty nesters and are moving on in life and trying to figure out who they want to be. And the next thing I would also say is just be the person that people want to be with.
Be the
So,
person.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you're complaining all the time and grousing and all of that, probably not going to be conducive to friendship.
No, yeah, if you are, if you kind of are, if you start to pay attention, I'm doing most of the talking when we get together and not much listening. That can be real draining for the other people. If you are, oh gosh, I'm trying to think. If you are one who has a propensity to kind of want to redirect the conversation back to you, that's also not real fun to be with. So definitely pay attention to those potential blind spots that could be there, and that may even be like, listen, y'all, I'm trying to, if telling your friend, listen, I'm trying to work on being a good friend. Am I doing this a little too much? Do you sense that? Like, and just being honest about it, like that's only going to yield good fruit. And I would say something else too I wanted to mention, because the converse of that, like your good friends you had for that season who ended up moving to Spain, but like being a good friend for somebody is, yeah, like, you need me to watch your kids for a few hours? Do you need dinner? Y'all have been sick with the flu. Can I bring dinner over? Or just saying, what day this week works to bring dinner over. Sometimes that's even nicer, because then you are showing that you really want to do it, and you're not, expecting the other person to go, no, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Um, Things like that, praying for your friends, like honestly praying for them, and then for a job interview or a big move or for their kids. Gosh, when people pray for my kids, I have some friends that pray for my kids like they're their own. And
Same. Yeah.
I am your sister for life then.
Yeah.
That there's nothing that endears me to you more. But I would also say too that sometimes we are in a lonely season, I believe, and it's not because we've done everything wrong or everything wrong. I feel like I know enough about friendship. I talk about, the title of my book is Desperate Woman Seeks Friends, and I wrote that because I was going to stand in my front yard in Dayton, Ohio, and hold that sign. This was before social media, that said "Desperate Woman Seeks Friends," because I was doing all the quote unquote right things to make friends, and it was not happening. So sometimes I believe the Lord does call us to a season of loneliness, because He wants to, kind of winnow down our distractions to widen our view on something that we need to take care of. Maybe that's something between you and the Lord, or something between you and your family, whatever it is. But it should be a season and not, again, forever and ever, amen, because God, designed us to need community. So, but yeah, I would say helping you, being the kind of friend that draws people. And I'll say this too on that front. I don't think anything has improved my friendships as much as working on my friendship with Jesus. Because when I am doing that, I am bringing a healthier gal to my
Yeah.
people, and one that doesn't drain them, one that feeds them, one that makes them feel better about themselves when they leave my presence than they did when they got there. And so that is probably the biggest thing we can do.
I'm so glad you brought that up because it's so, so important. It's critical. It's the most
Mm-mm.
important thing we can talk about today. Because I think that there are sometimes you just have to get with your friend Jesus. That's who you need to be with. And there are times that unfortunately or fortunately, depending upon how you look at it, there is nothing else that needs to, everything else gets in the way. And I just,
Right.
those times in my life where I just had to shut it down. I didn't want anybody physically, anybody human, anybody, even, not even a cat or a dog around me. I needed to have my Lord and Savior. And I
Hmm.
think it's just been an acquired skill that I've developed intentionally over the years that if there's something that goes down that's upsetting to me or concerning in any way, first person I'm going to go to is him. Whereas
Hmm.
back in high school, remember, we'd phone a friend.
Oh,
We do,
absolutely.
and I would think that if you're in a place where when something happens, the first thing you do is you're panicking, you're asking people for prayer, you're putting, prayer requests out online, or you're feeling like you need to talk to a friend. I'm going to say ouch to that. Because
Hmm.
I feel like until you can really get to, and it takes time and practice and in your walk with him
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
to shut all of that out and just spend some time with him so that he can satisfy you and answer your questions and then you can branch out for that support, which is
Yeah.
just so fun. And I do love the ebb and flow that happens in a friendship where sometimes you're the giver, sometimes you're the taker, give or take,
Yeah.
taker, right? And so you just always want to be mindful that you're not the person that's always doing the consuming.
Exactly. And there's going to be times where you are going through a real hard time and you can only give 30% to your friend and they're giving 70%. It's going to be lopsided,
Yeah,
but the bigger picture of reciprocity is that they are going to have the same thing. And it's their turn to only be able to give 30%, you're making up the difference. It's when if it's 100% or zero,
yeah,
that's just the way it is, then that friendship is on, that's not going to last very long. So, but
yeah.
yeah, there's going to be seasons where, you can't give everything because of grief or loss or what have you, um, but the gift of that is you know how to then be that person for somebody else when they're going through that season.
Yeah, I've really appreciated my friends at going through grief and loss, especially over the last 6 months, 7 months. And I've known those people, well, there was a meme that came out that said, you'll always remember those friends who held the flashlight in the dark.
Yes.
And it's just so cute because there's a dark cave and someone with a flashlight. And I think you know who you are, my friends. And so grateful for that. And there were times where I felt burdened a little bit because it was so one way and
Yes.
I was being taken care of. But I also knew at the end of the day that there was enough equity with those people that they understood that this is what is needed in this season, and we're here for you. And you're not always going to be in that season. So
Right.
that's so, so helpful. So I want to ask you, Kristen, you gave an example already of a friendship that developed for you, but are there any others that maybe stand out for you outside of parenting or ball games? You talked about putting yourself in places where you meet people. Um, I can't say since you've become an empty nester because maybe there are friendships that are longer than that. But can you think of
Mhm.
anything that would be helpful as an example to people in terms
Yeah.
of meeting someone?
Well, I can think of when I met my friend Maria, it was 2018, and I had a good group of friends by then. And I wasn't really looking for a new friend because it's not like I was opposed to it, but I certainly wasn't seeking it out because I kind of felt like, okay, I feel like I got a good group of friends. Now, I've never had the idea of like, check my friendships category box is filled. I'm done because I always think the Lord is going to, he can always choose to do a new thing. But
Yes.
I met Maria and we just hit it off like a house of fire, we got along like a house of fire, I guess, as the expression goes. But and it's interesting because, research says to have a really meaningful friend, you need 200 or 300 hours of time together. But Maria and I short circuited that. Like we just hit it off right away. Now we do have some similarities. We do have kids at similar ages, but I didn't know that actually when I met her. And so that stands out as a friendship I met that I was so glad I didn't close my heart off to. So glad I didn't go, oh, I don't really have time for a new friend. And because I was busy, I don't know that I had a lot of time. But when it's meant to be, it the Lord makes time, your schedule just it works out because as they say, you kind of make I mean, well, I don't know. You do make time for what's important to you, but sometimes I feel like that's still like there's a lot of things I'd like to make time for that I feel like I just can't. But anyway, all that to say is that it is absolutely possible to find a friend somewhere, that just surprises you right out of the blue. So much we talk about how friendship does take time, and it certainly does. And more often than not, I felt like it has taken more time to get to where I wanted than I felt like it should. But there are times when the Lord surprises you with a friendship. And another one that comes to mind too is
Wait, let me
our,
ask you, how did you meet
oh,
Maria?
we actually met. They had just moved in, so we met at church. They visited our community group for the very first time, and so that's how we met. Now, probably a better answer to your question though is when we met our friends the Brunos. So we met the Brunos. Actually, my husband met Joe Bruno first because he was driving up to work and Joe was on the side of the road. He'd run out of gas. So he saw him walking, like towards the nearest gas station. So and Joe was in uniform. So, David, my husband's actually really kind about pulling over to help people, but he figured this guy was, just fine. So he picked him up, took him to the gas station um, to get gas, brought him back to his car. They said, Joe was profusely thankful and they both went on their ways. Well, 2 months, well, I don't even know if it was 2 months, 6 weeks later or so, we move into the exact same apartment complex as Joe and his wife. And
That's
so
God.
that is God. And so it was one of those things like, would we have been friends with them if David and Joe hadn't met in that very random way? I mean, maybe, but I don't know, but we couldn't deny that there was, we were supposed to meet there. So it's greatly encouraging, I think, that when you are keep your heart open, the Lord could always surprise you with a friendship because we still had to, like, we then immediately invited them over. Like, we had to do that. We could have still just kept it as rather, superficial, hi bye as we walked into our respective apartments. But we didn't, and we are still friends today, even though we have not lived in the same place since 1997 or 1998. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm also thinking of another way, and I know we'll have to wrap up soon and I'll have to let you go, but I was thinking too, just asking your friends. That's another thing I think we're more willing to do. Asking your friends, do you have a friend for me? I mean, that seems so
yes,
simple, but I can think of, so my oldest and best friend is somebody, Roxanne, that I met when we were 12 years old. And my mom was the one who said, "Hey, I met this really nice girl." It was at the skating rink. "I met this
I
really nice
love it.
girl that you need to meet." And I just we met and we've been friends ever since, been through decades at this point together, even have daughters born on the same day. Now, there's another gal, but she still lives in San Diego. And I'm here
Mm,
in Kansas City, and she'll come out every summer and visit me on the farm, and we like to get together and do things. And she took me for my birthday to Florida in December. It was really sweet, but she's not here all of the time. So
hmm
I was going through something and I called my friend Missy and I go, "Who do you know that I could talk with that's, got these ideas kind of thing?" And she goes, "Oh, I know just the person, Carolyn." And like you said, we kind of hit the fast track and
Yes.
became just the closest friends, just online and talking. And
Mm,
so that's another thing I want to encourage people with. Don't feel afraid to reach out to someone, and do things that way. Like, "Oh, I'd love to get to know you this way." Or, "Do you want to put a group together on Zoom and we can have all of these like-minded women who love to pray for X, Y, or Z meet together in a group?" And the connections that the Lord will prosper are just mind-blowing. I think of another one of a couple of my friends, Diana Larkin and Patty Tycrow, who are extremely good friends now. And Ash West, we're all just so close because of just being on podcasts together and
hmm
that way through faith. So I think having it be so organically, your process is so organic when you trust God, is I guess what I'm saying. Leaving
Absolutely.
it open to Him. Seek the kingdom first, and all these things will be added unto you.
Right. Well, and I love what you're talking about is I like to think of almost like not friendship circles, but like horseshoes,
Yeah,
because, there's always room for one more. Like,
indeed.
and yeah, and there's no need for a spirit of competition. There is enough love in a friendship
I
to go,
agree.
for that friend and then an additional friend. It just in God's economy, he more is more. He just makes it work out. So
Yeah,
so
you
I
can
love
increase,
that.
sorry, you can increase your friend group. It's up to you.
Absolutely.
Because, like, I can think of the people that are in different cities. Several of my friends are in Nashville. I'm here in Kansas City. I have friends all over the place. And I'm always saying, "Let's do a Zoom call because I want you to meet Carolyn, or I want you to meet Karen, another dear friend of mine here in Kansas City. I want you two to meet. Or let's get on a call with these two, or let me introduce you to my friend Missy." Though that is so fun because then it's, gosh, it's like, I wanted to say popcorn kernels popping, but that's such a bad analogy. It's more like you're taking these little bits of the embers from the campfire and igniting other fires
Yes,
all
yes.
around. And before you know it, your friends are friends, and you're part of this bigger group and part of something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. And so then when, life happens as life is going to do, it's not if, it's when. You have like a group there then that is in your corner and just helping you double, not only double the joys, but divide the sorrows. And that's, I think, why God wants us to have our people. I have a couple of friends who call me the connector friend because I love to do that as well, introduce folks, to each
Yeah,
other.
love it. And then I put them on the same thread together, but there's an author group I'm a part of too, and it's just a delight. Okay, well, what else do you want to tell us about what you offer? You have a study as well.
Yes, we got a few things. So,
Yeah.
Desperate Woman Seeks Friends. If you go to kristenstrong.com, you can navigate to the book section and find Desperate Woman Seeks Friends. And right now, well, I don't know when this podcast is releasing. We have pre-order bonuses right now.
Okay, well, do you have anything that you can show them? Because I don't have a way to screen share. I wish they could see.
You bet. You
Okay,
bet.
because it's
Yeah.
darling.
Yes, here's the
Love
book.
it. Love it. That's the kind of book I would pick up. That cover
Yes,
screams information I want to read.
I love it. Well, and she's fun and she's sassy. So I think the cover reflects that.
Yeah.
So she's heartfelt, but she's fun and sassy as well. But yeah, so,
I
there
think
are,
today, by the way, in answer to your question, and
oh,
today is, what is today? It's Tuesday, the
the
29th,
29th.
yes, of April. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the book releases May 13th. If
Okay.
you're able to get the book, or if you're able to get the book before then, there's pre-order bonuses available by way of, like, you can get signed play cards to put in the book as a gift. I will, if you purchase in multiple copies, I will do a Zoom call with you or your book club. There's also like a special video message pertaining to the hardest parts of friendships, like friendship breakups and whatnot. I know the exact title of it is spacing me right now, but it's in that lane. And there are also, let me see, what are my other pre-order bonuses? I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. You know what? We didn't even, I put you on the spot. Um, I love,
Um,
I want to get an autographed copy. How do I do that?
Well, yeah. So if you go to kristenstrong.com and then find Desperate Woman Seeks Friends under the books, under the books section of the nav bar, you'll see like how to pre-order the book, and you can get the book at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Bookshop, Christian Book, wherever you like to purchase books. And then you'll just scroll down a little bit more, and you can begin reading the book immediately. You can get the first 3 chapters of the book to read. Yeah, getting through a friendship breakup video guide that I mentioned. That is a video you can watch. And then there's a friendship challenge calendar in addition to all of that. So, but also when the book goes on sale on May 13th, we're going to have another kind of fun offering that I'm excited about that I'm still putting together, but it's some great interviews with some really smart gals on, just how to thrive at friendship in different scenarios. So I'm real excited about that. But yeah, you can find in kristenstrong.com, and my first name is Kristen. That's where you can find all the deets.
I love that. And I love the idea of book club and having
Yeah.
so many. I love that. I'll have to use it. I'm actually publishing a book probably this summer. It's coming out. So I'm
Oh,
so excited. I might use some of your ideas. They all sounded fabulous to me.
oh, thank you. Well, I use away.
Yay. Well, it's been such a pleasure. You know what? I was going to say, it sounds like a great way to make friends. Start a book club.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Book club's a great idea. Yeah, they're I at least according to my Facebook page, there are a lot of book clubs out there. I'm in one, but there's a lot. So yeah, and I think it would be a fun book for a book club. So and we are actually, now that you say that, I'm remembering we are putting together a discussion guide that will be available a little bit later. But yeah, all good, all kinds of good stuff.
I love it. I love your energy. This has been so much fun. So see, now I've met another friend because you've come
Well,
to the podcast today.
I feel the same way, Janet. You were a delight. So I'm so glad you had me on today.
It's been a pleasure. It's been just a real joy to talk to you. So, do you want to say anything else before I let you go, Kristen?
Well, I would just say to the gal listening who hears all this and thinks, well, this is all lovely. I've been there, done that. I got the t-shirt and it's not going to be the way it works out for me. I would just encourage you that I have been that girl. I understand that. And I would say that the Lord loves you in your heart just as much as he loves mine, Janet, anybody else who's listening. And he does want you to have the friends you want and you need. And just if you can just keep trying and not give up, I believe you will see what you will find what you hope to find there.
I think that's beautiful. It's so
Mhm,
true. Yeah.
mhm.
Nobody's left out. There's a place for everyone at the table.
There is.
Yeah.
There is. At the table God has in mind for you, there's absolutely a place. And there is a table he has in mind for you.
Yeah. Don't
So,
give up.
amen.
All right. Thank you, Kristen Strong. I will have your information in the show notes, and I encourage the rest of you to check out what Kristen has written and find those friends because that's what God wants for you. Thank you for joining us on Color Speak today. We love you. Bye.